What is branding really, other than a buzzword that's been bounced around by far too many people who didn't completely understand what they were saying? And do you know who won the Nobel Prize for discovering branding in 1904? Yes, it's been around for a century. That was Ivan Pavlov. You'll remember that Ivan rubbed meat paste on the tongue of a dog as he rang a bell. The dog began to associate the taste of the meat with the sound of the bell. Voila, branding was born. Branding, by definition, is simply the implantation of an associative memory in combination with a recall cue. A spoonful of sugar. If you're like most Americans, you'll be remembering right now the movie with Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke, Mary Poppins. You see, the phrase, a spoonful of sugar, is commonly linked to that movie. This is an example of associative memory. Associative memory is simply a memory which has become linked to another memory. A recall cue is a mental trigger which prompts a reader, a listener, or a viewer to take a prescribed action at an appointed time. There are three keys to implanting an associative memory into the mind of the customer. Most people get the first two instinctively, but the third one they miss. The first key is consistency. Pavlov never offered the dog food without ringing the bell. And he never rang the bell without offering food. In other words, he didn't keep changing the campaign. The second key is frequency. Pavlov did this day after day after day. He did not come back at the end of 8 or 12 weeks and say, this ain't working. I must be reaching the wrong dog. I've targeted the wrong dog for this kind of meat.
Now that is what he would assume had he been trained in advertising and marketing. Oh, you've reached a dog, that's a visual dog. You see, not all dogs are meat dogs. Some dogs are visual. Or maybe he's one of them tactile dogs. He's one of those, there's auditory and there's kinesthetic and then there's visual. I bet he's a visual dog. That's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, when somebody starts teaching you that some people are auditory and some people are visual and some people are kinesthetic, you're talking to somebody who is either a liar or a fool. The odds are they're merely a fool, because that is total crap. And if you ever begin to dig beneath the surface, you will find that it's hocus pocus taught by people who make shit up and they swear to it. And whenever you say, so could you support that? Because that is totally incongruent with everything that is known about the human mind. That is totally incongruent with everything taught by every cognitive neuroscientist in the world.
Pavlov was committed to consistency and frequency, but so are most business owners. What we typically lack is anchoring. When implanting an associative memory, the recall cue, in Pavlov's case, the bell, must be associated with a memory which is already anchored in the mind. In this case, the dog's love for the taste of meat. Frequency and consistency create branding only when your message is tied to an established emotional anchor. Pavlov's branding campaign was anchored to the dog's love for the taste of meat. If the dog did not love meat, the frequent and consistent ringing of the bell would have produced no response other than to irritate the dog.
And oh, the dog is irritated today. From coast to coast, the people of North America say, I hate advertising. Gee, why, dog? Because it's never about me or anything I care about. It's always about some idiot. How many years they've been in business, their fast, fair, and friendly service, their big selection and low, low prices. Well, gee, dog, that's a little harsh. Does it always have to be about you? Yeah, actually it does. I'm a dog. So what do you like to talk about, dog? I like to talk about meat. So your thing is, yeah, meat. Meat. Give me a bite, give me a bite, give me a bite, give me a bite. Okay, dog, here's a bite. Give me another one, give me another one, give me another one, give me another one. You ever had a dog do that to you?
Your customer is just such a dog, as are we all. Is your recall cue, your slogan, your positioning statement, or other repetitious element in your advertising tied to an anchor in the heart of your customer, or are you just irritating the dog.
A recall cue is simply a mental trigger which prompts a reader, a listener, or a viewer to take a prescribed action at a prescribed time. Now, you never know when that time is going to come. Bad marketing tries to anticipate the moment of need. Good marketing makes sure that you are the name remembered when that moment happens.
Talk to the dog in the language of the dog about what matters to the dog.
Good branding is reaching somebody, anybody, and impressing them deeply enough, with enough salience, enough impact, enough repetition, to be remembered. And in so doing, if you reach 10% of the city correctly, that 10% will reach, ultimately, the other 90. We have found in media buying a point of diminishing returns. You can argue it if you like, but we have proven it to ourselves so often that I'm not even willing to discuss it anymore. When I am reaching half the population of a city, 50% of the breathing humans in a city, an average of 3 or more times per week, 52 weeks a year, you can no longer advertise your way to growth. When you own half, forget the other half. You can double your budget, you can triple your budget, you can quadruple your budget. The results of your advertising are not going to change when you're reaching half the people in the community. Now, I'm not talking about half of your target audience. I'm talking about half of the people who breathe air. Half of the people 12 years old and older. Okay? They're old enough to talk and have an opinion. When you're reaching half of the population, an average of 3 times a week, 52 weeks a year, and you keep doing that, they will reach the other half for you. End of story. You are a household word. End of story. You are like Coca-Cola, you're everywhere.
Neurologically, branding is nothing more than the result of salience times repetition. But repetition costs money. Salience, on the other hand. Impact, relevance is the product of powerful messaging. Good writing, reinforced by carefully selected shapes, colors, sounds, and juxtaposition in video or audio production, photography, or graphic layout, taking full advantage of all these other sub-languages of the mind.
Juxtaposition, the relationship of 2 objects to each other, is a language of the mind. And it is most notably communicated in the Japanese art of Feng Shui. Are you familiar? It's an interior decorator's thing, and it's very, very real. Now, it's wrapped in a bunch of mystical crap, but what they did is they stumbled into one of the realities of the sub-languages of the mind, the juxtaposition of shape. It can also be done in graphics. It can also be done in magazine layouts, website layouts. There's a message signaled by certain shapes in relationship to each other. If you study that, it's really fascinating stuff, and an interior decorator can do it and communicate an entirely different statement simply by rearranging the objects in a room to make it feel more inviting or less inviting. Did you know, statistically, this is insane, but statistically, houses are more likely to be burgled if around the perimeter of the yard, like there's a sidewalk that runs past the front of the house, right? Now, what is there that runs alongside the sidewalk? A hedge. A little hedge, 24 or 30 inches high, and anybody could step over the hedge. It's not really a barrier. But the house that has the hedge, that has this little signal that says, on the other side is your side, over here is our side. You have invaded us when you step across this bush. Those houses are statistically less likely to be burgled. That's just insane. But there is a whole language of, we are prepared for you. We're looking for you. We don't want you here. We're ready to defend ourselves. Leave us alone. You send those signals with things like hedges, fences, even a little white picket fence. Says, that's your side, this is our side. And so those objects and where objects are placed, even in simple graphic layouts, is a very real language of the mind. And so I don't want you guys to think that only things that can be communicated are in words. That's not true. We're more equipped to interpret sounds, and we can say more complex things with sounds, but by no stretch of the imagination is that the only language of the mind.
We won't go into these other sub-languages in this particular series, but we have completed an audio book with a complete transcript called Thought Particles, Binary Code of the Mind.